This book is supposed to be a thriller and a love story. Like, bestie, say less. I've read them all 3 times. She's thick, okay? This book was so incredibly charming. They're books that are written to put a little sprinkle of magic into anyone's lives. Hello friends, I am so excited because today we will be discussing all of the books to get you out of a reading slump. And I think I picked some good ones. My name is Lexi and welcome back to my channel. I am so incredibly excited for today's video. I had so much fun filming this a year ago and I knew I really wanted to attempt to do it again. If you are personally in a reading slump, have no fear because I am here with all the books to get you out of one. But before we get into today's video, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Disney Book Group. Today's video is sponsored by Disney Book Group in promotion of their newest YA release, Ballad and Dagger by Daniel Jose Older. Best-selling author Rick Riordan presents Daniel Jose Older's music and magic-filled YA urban fantasy about 2 teens who discover each other and their powers during a political battle within a unique diaspora community. I also love that this book is an urban fantasy. I feel like urban fantasies are a lot easier to get into, especially if you're in a reading slump, because they take place in a world that's really similar to our world, just with magic. And like everything is better with magic. You know what I mean? Also, this book is supposed to be a thriller and a love story. Like, bestie, say less. I feel like both of those traits are also perfect for books that will help get you out of a reading slump. I love thrillers because I feel like they are so easy to consume. And like, who doesn't love a love story, you know? This book is available now everywhere, so if it sounds good to you, you can go ahead and check it out. I will have more information down below if you want to click on the link and learn more about Ballad and Dagger. If you are in a reading slump, this might just be the book to pull you back out of one. And now let's get back to the list. So I have gone ahead and curated this list based on books that I think are going to be fast-paced and really engaging. So if you are currently struggling, you want to read right now but you don't know what to read, or maybe nothing is sounding good when you pick it up, or maybe every single book that you're picking up you're just not vibing with, hopefully this list will go ahead and break you out of that and we can get you out of that reading slump. The majority of these books I have read, but there are 4 books on here that I have not read but have been recommended to me several times by multiple friends, and I think that they will be perfect to also get you out of a reading slump. So let's get started. So let's go ahead and start with graphic novels. When I am in a reading slump, sometimes it is because my brain needs a break from like the monotony of seeing a novel broken up in like a text, and I find that a great way to kind of break out of a reading slump is through changing up the medium that I'm using to consume a story, and I find graphic novels are such a great way to do that. So okay, let's go ahead and start first with Heartstopper, and this is by Alice Oseman. This is currently a Netflix series and I just started the series, and you guys, I love it so much, and I love this book series so much as well. This is a series that I definitely think you can read in a day, like the entire series, not just the first book. It is so fast-paced, it's very engaging, and it is a very sweet story. This particular book is following Charlie and Nick, who strike up a friendship, and then when Charlie starts to develop feelings for Nick, he is basically wondering if they are reciprocated. So it's a really cute and charming love story, and I feel like Alice Oseman presents this story where you're really invested in the characters really quickly. I also love that this is now a Netflix series, because if you are in a reading slump, you can kind of use these as an excuse to watch the story. Like, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but a lot of the times when I don't know what to read, I will read a book that I know is being made into like a series or a movie so that I can appreciate those movies and TV series even more. So if you're in a reading slump, you might want to pick this up and then binge the Netflix series. The next one I have is also YA, and that is Fence. And this is by C.S. Pacat, and it is illustrated by Johanna the Mad. You guys, expect to see this series in like a lot of recommendation videos that I'm gonna do because I am obsessed with this. If you are really struggling, you don't know what to pick up next, and you have not picked this up, I'm begging you, please please pick this up because it is one of the most engaging and fast-paced series I've ever read. I read all 4 volumes in a single day, and since then I've read them all 3 times. This particular book is a competition story, and I also find that competition stories are really, really great at like sucking you in. I always find myself like rooting for the underdog in all competition stories, and this one is no different. We're following our main protagonist, whose name is Nicholas, and Nicholas is the illegitimate son of a world-class fencer, and he decides that he wants to become an even better fencer than his dad. And on his way to doing this, he actually enters into a fencing competition, and he meets this guy here. And this guy here kind of becomes Nicholas's mortal enemy. He completely devastates Nicholas at this competition, and he calls Nicholas Zero. And Nicholas is now like completely convinced that in addition to becoming a world-class fencer to beat his dad, he also wants to beat this guy. He ends up transferring to this very elite preparatory school to try out for their fencing team. And lo and behold, when he gets there, he finds out that his roommate is his new mortal enemy. The tension between these two is unlike anything I've ever read. And in fact, every single character you kind of get invested in as they're all trying to get onto this fencing team. It is so good. It is so fast-paced. I don't know anyone who honestly I wouldn't recommend this to. I really, really think that you should pick it up. Okay, next up, I'm gonna go ahead and recommend the shortest book on this list and then also the longest book on this list. So for the shortest book on this list, I highly recommend that you check out Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is a great book, I think, to get you out of a reading slump because it's really, really short. So it's the type of book that isn't going to intimidate you if you aren't really feeling in the mood to pick something up. But the story itself is also so fascinating that I think it's going to keep you turning the page, even if you don't necessarily feel like you're in the mood to read. It's a book about our narrator who goes by the name Piranesi, and he finds himself in a world that he doesn't really understand, and he's trying to document his world. And so there's this huge element of like a mystery. We're trying to figure out who the narrator is and where he is, and I found myself so engaged and invested in the story because I had to know the mystery. If you are a type of person who loves mystery in books as well, I could not recommend this more. It's considered adult literary fiction, but do not let that like scare you off at all because I feel like it's very, very accessible, and it is just so perfect if you need a book that you're going to devour within a day. The next book on this list is the longest book. Now hear me out. A lot of the times when you're in a reading slump, you need like a quick fix, right? You need like a really good audiobook recommendation. You need like a really great graphic novel or something short. But also I have found that sometimes what you need is a book that's going to really immerse you in an incredible world. And that world is gonna kind of take you out of your own thoughts. And for that, I could not recommend more The Final Empire, Mistborn Book 1 by Brandon Sanderson. This is intimidating because she's thick, okay? And I fully appreciate that, and I definitely agree. But when I picked this book up, I actually was in a reading slump, and I ended up reading this book, I think in the span of like 3 days, and I basically skipped sleeping for one of those days because it was so fast-paced and so immersive. This book is following Vin, and Vin is a thief, and she seems to have kind of like this special ability that she calls her luck ability. She can basically kind of have a little bit of sway on people's emotions. This ability is actually picked up by this guy named Kelsier, who is kind of putting together the ultimate heist crew. So that's another thing. If you love a good heist novel like Six of Crows, you are really gonna love this because the entire thing is a magical heist. So it's a heist on the Dark Lord in their world. It is so fast-paced, it is so engaging. I feel like the plot moved so incredibly quickly, and if you're looking for a book to really take you out of your own world, I could not recommend this enough. Okay, next up, let's talk some thrillers. So the first thriller that I have read and loved and highly recommend is The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharpe. This is a YA thriller, and I loved how fast-paced the entire book is. I read this last summer, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it. So this book actually takes place in a bank. Nora is with her new girlfriend and her ex-boyfriend, and they are dropping something off at the bank. A bunch of robbers come in with a bunch of guns, and they tell everyone to get on the floor, and they are trying to rob the bank. Nora has actually grown up as a con artist, so she's grown up with a mom who was really unstable unstable. She's had to learn basically how to configure different identities so that they could con a lot of really bad people in multiple different areas. And to survive this bank heist, Nora has to go back and become every single girl in her past. It is one of the most fast-paced and engaging books ever. If you are a person who really likes to be thrown into the action of a novel, I could not recommend this more. The next thriller that I highly recommend is a new one, and it is by Lucy Foley, and that is The Paris Apartment. So this book is following Jess, and Jess goes to stay with her brother who has an apartment in Paris. But when she gets there, her brother is missing, and all of his neighbors seem to have a secret that they need to hide. And the more Jess learns about her brother and what he was getting into, the more she becomes worried that someone has tried to harm him. This is the perfect recommendation, I think, if you are in a reading slump and also need to be pulled out by maybe an audiobook. So if you're gonna pick up this thriller, I highly recommend that you pair it with the audiobook, because the audiobook has a full cast. It's so immersive. I feel like the acting in it in particular was just so well done. I loved all of the voice actors. I feel like they really added to the tension and the suspense of this thriller. It is so good. The next book I have to recommend isn't really an action-based book. So if you're a person who likes a more quaint and charming read, but you also can't find anything that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend picking up Sourdough or Lois and the Adventures in the Underground Market by Robin Sloan. This book was so incredibly charming. It's also very, very short. I think it's under like 250 pages. I read this book in a day. I felt like it was really, really engaging. The book itself is following Lois, who is really unhappy at her job, and one day she is gifted a sourdough starter. I didn't know this before reading this, but apparently with sourdough starters, you actually have to feed them and keep them alive, or you can't bake sourdough bread. And so Lois has to kind of like care for this sourdough starter almost like a pet. She has to have it listen to music. She has to feed it like all of these different things. She ends up talking to the sourdough starter. Through all of this, she falls in love with the act of baking bread. It is so cute. It's very, very quaint. It's very, very charming. And I like this book because even though it read really fast, it was like a relaxing read. So if you're a person who maybe you're struggling with like a little bit of anxiety in your life and you want a book to kind of take you out of your world, maybe pick this book up, because I actually found that this book really helped calm me down and really took me out of my own thoughts, and I love it so much. The next two books I have are both middle grades. I know not everyone reads middle grades like past a certain age, but hear me out. I kind of think of middle grades the way I think of Disney movies. So I feel like you can enjoy a Disney movie at any age. They're not just books written for kids, they're books that are written to put a little sprinkle of magic into anyone's lives. And I feel like they are perfect if you are in a reading slump, because they're quick reads that make you feel good and can also like take you out of your world really quickly, much like Disney. So the first recommendation I have here is actually a little bit of like a thriller for middle grade, and that is The Strangers, and this is by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is a book about three siblings, and they're very, very happy. They live with their mom. And then one day there is a news report that three siblings with their exact ages and birthdays and names have all been kidnapped. Their mom completely freaks out and tells them that she has to go. When their mom disappears, they decide to try to look more into this case and figure out who these kids are and who kidnapped them. And the more they look into this, the stranger the story gets. It is so good. One reason that I really, really love this for reading slumps in particular is because every single chapter is short and every single chapter leaves you on a cliffhanger. So you're kind of like really moved along as the reader because you are desperate to know what's actually happening and what the mystery is. If you are in a reading slump, I honestly feel like this is one of the best books to pick up. It will absolutely knock your reading slump to the ground. And then the final middle grade that I have here is going to be Howl's Moving Castle, and this is by Diana Wynne Jones. This is a book that I would categorize as like a cozy fantasy. It's a book that feels like a warm hug. I love this book with my whole entire heart. The book is following Sophie, and Sophie is cursed basically to look older, and she ends up becoming a cleaning lady for a wizard named Howl, and she finds out that Howl has this magical house, and the house travels. It moves. It's Howl's Moving Castle. And the story is kind of following Sophie and Howl and their adventures, and also Sophie as she tries to take away this curse that has befallen on her. It's a book that really will take you out of your own head. It makes me feel so cozy and so safe, and I feel like the story is incredibly engaging. And finally, we have come to the portion of the video where I have 4 books that I think sound like they will take anyone out of a reading slump, but I haven't technically read them yet. The first book I have here is by Richard Osman, and that is The Thursday Murder Club. This book has so many things that kind of tick off the reading slump checklist. The first one is that it's really short, but also the story itself sounds so engaging and so fast-paced. We're following a group of men who I think all live in a retirement home, and every Thursday they get together and discuss true crime cases that haven't been solved, and they try to solve them together. And then one night there is a dead body that is discovered right by where they live, and they decide to try to crack the case in real life. It sounds so cute. I don't know anyone who doesn't love this book. I think now it's also a series, so if you end up really invested in this, you can actually continue on. But I love this idea of these friends getting together and trying to solve a real life case. I feel like it sounds like the perfect thriller, but it also sounds really cozy. The next book I'm recommending is The Illuminae Files, and this is by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I chose this one to get you out of a reading slump because it is a book with multimedia. It's a book filled with text messages and letters and scraps of paper, and sometimes I feel like, again, what can kind of break you out of a reading slump is getting out of the traditional monotony of a novel. So I picked this one just because I feel like, especially if you pair it with the audiobook, which is a full cast and has like lots of sound effects and stuff, I just feel like it would be a great way to kind of distract you and really get you back into reading. The book itself is following Katie and Ezra, who have just gone through a very devastating breakup, and they both are kind of like forced to flee together when I think their spaceship is attacked. I don't really know a lot more than that. The next book I have here is another thriller, and that is Finlay Donovan is Killing It, and this is by Elle Cosimano. So this book is following Finlay, and Finlay is a single mom who is trying to make it as a thriller author. So she like writes thrillers and mysteries. She's having a meeting with her editor when someone overhears her, and she's talking about how she's trying to kill off her main character, but the person who overhears her thinks that Finlay Donovan is a hit woman, and she leaves her a very large sum of money and says, "Can you please kill my husband?" And so now we're following Finlay Donovan as she tries to become, I think, like a hit woman. I have heard so many wonderful things about this book. I've heard that it is quirky. I've heard that it's really funny, that it's really fast paced. In fact, I haven't heard a single person say that they don't like this book. And one thing that I'm really excited about when picking this up is the fact that it's supposed to be really funny. And again, I feel like with book slumps, one of the best ways to beat them, aside from like changing up the format of your book and also maybe changing the length up of your book, is by picking up a book that is going to be really funny. And then finally, the last book I have here is a YA thriller, and that is One of Us is Lying, and this is by Karen M. McManus. This particular book is about 4 teenagers who all go into detention, and one of them is lying, and when they leave detention, I think one of them ends up dead, and now we have to figure out like who did it. I love Karen M. McManus. I read her book The Cousins and loved it so much, and so many people have recommended that I choose this one next because this is supposed to be like her best book. I love that this kind of sounds like The Breakfast Club, except way more sinister and dark. I mean, obviously, like someone dies, but I just feel like it's gonna be really fun to read. I've heard it's incredibly fast paced, and also it's pretty short. And you guys, I think that's it. That's my entire list for all of the books that hopefully will get you out of a reading slump. I hope that you guys found at least one book that sounds good from the list. And I would love to know, are there any book recommendations that you would recommend to me as a book that has gotten you out of a reading slump before? Please leave them down below. And again, a huge thank you to Disney Book Group for sponsoring this video. And also don't forget to check out the link for Ballad and Dagger down below in my description box. The book is out everywhere now. If you're interested at all in YA urban fantasies, I think you should check it out. If you have made it to this point of the video, please leave me a smiley face emoji. That would be wonderful, and that would brighten my day. I hope all of you are doing so well. I love you guys so much, and until next time, book lovers, keep your head in the clouds and your heart in a book, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye!
Always think of you when spring comes, like it's something in the air. the time, don't know why. Always dream of you when spring comes. It's like the heat